All right, good morning, everyone. It is March 5th, Urban and Economic Development Committee meeting. I am Councilor Laura Bellis chairing this meeting, and first item on the agenda, I call this meeting to order. Second item, Rosalind Williams, appointment to the Board of Adjustment, replacing Austin Bond. Term expires May 10th, 2025 from Council District 1. If you want to join us at the table at any seat that, looks convenient to you. All right.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Hey, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a bit about yourself and why you're interested in serving on the Board of Adjustment.
Well, I'm a realtor, and I've also recently started an organization here in Tulsa called NARAB, which is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. That organization was created in 1947 because African Americans were not allowed to call themselves realtors. That has since changed, of course, as we know, and it has evolved. So our stance now is to promote democracy in housing and to help people obtain the American dream of home ownership. We do a lot of events and activities, educational programs, just offering any goods and resources we can to promote home ownership.
Great.
Yeah, Councilor Archie.
A pleasure to meet you. And in Tulsa, we need a lot more housing, but the way that you build generational wealth is by home ownership. And so I definitely want to connect with NARAB and help you continue that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to put a side point that I just left a midwinter conference in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for NARAB, and actually we have won the bid to be the 2026 host for that conference, and it will bring in anywhere from 800 to 1,000 real estate professionals.
Wow,
so it's going to be great for Tulsa. It's going to be held at the Hyatt downtown. So we've secured that as well. So I think that this is a big step in the direction of the mayor's initiative to get those the home numbers up in the city.
Well, if you need resources for those visitors, just as a quick chair privilege moment, you actually have the person who runs Visit Tulsa here at the same time.
I would love to do
She's
that.
just mentioned a conference that's going to be coming through if you all want to connect.
Absolutely.
All right, Councilor Dectorite.
Thank you. Thanks for your willingness to serve. Have you had interaction as a realtor or just a citizen with the Board of Adjustment?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I think they've streamlined some of their things. You know, when the medicinal cannabis was passed, they had a lot of issues going before them that I think now they've streamlined. But I would definitely check with Mr. Bond and some of the other ones and see kind of what the hot topics are that are coming before them, just to, you know, as you get onboarded, they can have some long meetings, so.
Yes.
Well, it's okay. I'm here to serve. You know, I'm at a phase in my life where my kids are grown and grandbabies are everything, but it does give me a little bit more time to focus on some of the needs of the community and of others, and so I look forward to serving.
I think it's great that you're willing to give back to the community in this way and bring your lens and perspective from your professional background and just time in Tulsa.
Well, my children live here,
Yeah.
and your children live here,
Yeah.
and I want it to be better for them than it was for us, so
Absolutely.
this is part of that.
Thank you.
Good.
Anyone else?
Fist bump all the way across the board. I have a headache, so I'm
Yeah, so I was looking at Councilor Bagel because I know he has complex feelings about the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah, that's why I was looking at them.
You know, just to give you context, it's always, and I think that I'm glad that we're getting to see you now, and if you actually have any experiences there, want to recommend anything back to us as a council, please let us know. Where we'll have neighbors sometimes come to us to complain about something that's happening in their neighborhood that wasn't a council decision, it was a Board of Adjustment decision, and that can be really hard for people and neighbors to navigate, and so we are grateful that you are willing to also navigate that dynamic. It's an important one, especially for our housing needs. Well, just so you know, we will be voting on this appointment on the 12th at the 5 p.m. meeting. You are welcome to attend, but you do not have to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Am I?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for, I know, not too painful.
You know, realtor life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, agenda item 3, Linda Jenkins, reappointment to the Sales Tax Overview Committee, term expires December 31st, 2028. Had really great meeting attendance from Council District 1. Sit wherever she
Is
wants.
this the designated seat?
Wherever, yeah, this could be you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, know a lot of us are probably familiar with,
Yes, I have been serving for 8 years on the
Yes.
Sales Tax Overview Committee. So, yes, I'm very familiar with how it works, and
I guess, is there anything, especially knowing that this is you, continuing to serve, I was just curious, obviously if there's anything you want to share with us about your experience or what you're focused on or think we should be focusing on. I'm just curious since you're here.
well, you know, I'm always focused on District 1, although I do pay attention to the rest of the community, but I'm very intentional about being a representative of my community. I would also say that it's been beneficial to have that long-term experience on the committee, because some of our projects do take a long time to be completed. And it's really beneficial to have that long-term perspective with regard to what's happening. And I would also say that I have been a contributor to helping us streamline and organize the reports and the information in a way that makes it easy, or I'd say easier, for us as citizens to understand the information. And I think that that has been definitely one of my contributions over the years in constantly saying, how do we make sure we all can track what's happening?
Yeah.
And being able to do that.
Absolutely. Any other
Thank you.
follow-up questions? Thank you for continuing to serve, and as you said, making that information more accessible. It's such an important body of public oversight, so we're really grateful for your continued service. All right.
You're not getting tired of it, are you?
No, I am not.
I don't think she'd be sitting here if that
I would have had a different response to that phone call. No, it's one of the best, I think it's one of the best activities I continue to do.
And are you vice chair?
I'm secretary now.
Secretary,
I was
okay.
vice chair for quite a while,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
I let somebody else have that
There we go.
opportunity.
Well, thank you again for I'm glad you brought up about how helpful it is to longitudinally serve, because I know that, for your point, projects take a long time, so. But yeah, so we will also be voting on this on the 12th at 5 o'clock. You're welcome to attend, but you don't have to, and maybe you're tired of it, so.
Always happy to come.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are on agenda item 4, presentation by representatives from council staff in the mayor's office on the summary report from the January 22nd mayor council retreat and proposed next steps for the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget process. And we have our own Sarah Davis and mayor's office Shane Stone with us to present, and we're getting handouts with large pieces of paper attached to them. Great.
Oh, I don't have the revised one. Madam Chair, I may start, just
Yeah,
kick us off
absolutely.
from where we were 6 weeks ago? Does it feel like 6 weeks ago? Was it 6 weeks ago? Was it 8 weeks ago? It was a while ago.
I think it was 5 weeks ago.
Okay.
January.
Well, just as a reminder, and I don't really need to remind any of us because we all participated very well in the conversation. And I was really impressed with all the employees and department heads we had in attendance. You know, they're just absolutely critical to the things we get to do in and for the city. But, 5 weeks ago, we met and we were just throwing out dreams, ideas, aspirations. And Shane and Sarah were catching all of those things, and they caught them in 4 general categories, which we eventually resolved to lump sum a bunch of ideas into. So homelessness, public safety, economic development, and then children, youth, and families. So today, we're going to walk through a more concentrated, summarized list of these ideas. I think Sarah and Shane have gone through and talked to department heads and further refined these. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a framework, a document that we will use going forward in prioritizing what we do legislatively, budgetarily, and in so many other ways. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and to Shane to walk us through these documents and everything else we need to do. And do we have all the right people? Is the mayor at the table?
Just stepped out for a quick
Okay. Well, the mayor will be joining us when he gets back.
I can do it.
Shane and I are super flexible.
Okay, I'm happy to.
I have to separate them.
Yeah,
I'm
we
happy to
can
do it.
communicate telepathically
Okay.
and
We've
across
got
seats.
We've got it down.
Yeah, Laura's
Shane's actually gonna start us out and then I'll walk us through it a little bit more.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And Counselors, as you're looking over the materials, I do want to make sure credit where credit's due. Marissa Gomez and Sarah from the council office really got these materials to the visual point where they are. On the substance of them, you'll remember when we left the mayor-council retreat, we'd gotten, as Chairman, Council Chair Lakin had pointed out, we got to a really good point of identifying the priorities, but what we promised was to bring this to the departments, come back with an action plan, and that is what we have been working on since that mayor-council retreat, so that is what we will be presenting today. Yep, so the value statement that we start off with at the head of this is we aim to finish what we started and focus city efforts on the priorities while maintaining a balance of our revenue and expenses. And you'll see that reflected through the rest of the work in this presentation.
So this first slide you see, if you remember at the end of the retreat, we had a not as pretty version of this where we came up with 4 general themes and priorities. So those were homelessness, public safety, economic development, and children, youth, and families. Below those, you all had identified potential ways that we really wanted to tackle those issues. And those are listed in the sub-bullet points. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next little while going through those sub-bullet points. And we know we just put a lot of papers in front of you. So to give you an opportunity to really review those, talk through each priority, and give your input on these. Just a clarification, this is still a draft form. This is our best attempt to meet the priorities that you said. And another important point, as Shane pointed out on that value statement, some of these action items don't have funding identified for them yet. That's going to be part of your budgeting process. It's going to be part of your weighing your priorities process. And so that's all the collective thing that you all will do over the next few months. So the first one is homelessness. Homelessness has been a priority for several years. But how we are approaching it changes based on the needs of the community and based on the items that you all have put forward. So we know we started with the 3H task force. One of those items, though, was the decommissioning encampment process. So you set funding for that, coordinator positions. The mayor's office has added people specifically focused on this issue as well. And so that is an action step that was envisioned but not yet implemented yet. And so we can also have people talk to you about those more. And then additional support for housing vouchers. A lot of this work is great work, but if you don't have any place for people to go, once you do those work, then your program's not really successful. So at each point in the process of helping people find housing and getting into the appropriate kind of housing, there kind of has to be programs at each stage and each phase. Increasing housing infrastructure, again, pre-approved plans. You all remember the kickoff event happened in January. There also is organizational structure in order to prioritize responses to infrastructure needs. And then we know we have the buckets for Improve Our Tulsa 3, but actually programming out those buckets, making sure that we make the best decision to leverage and maximize the use of that funding is a goal item there. Preventing homelessness also involves upstream solutions. So that is that third bucket that you are seeing. And that's really a collective community conversation. Lots of stakeholders involved in that. And so that was the identified action item there. And then we know, especially from this winter, we've had 2 major winter weather events where we have had a lot of city staff and community partners especially focus on winter weather response. So this is really developing the capacity to meet those winter shelter needs when they arise the next year. You do have an item this afternoon that really dives into the winter shelter response, and so we'll have those experts here at that time. I do kind of want to pause on each priority
That was a great
item
question.
and give you time to look at the sheet. So on your work plan, those items are all on page 1. Just to give a little bit more context, the how are the specific action steps. We have target dates. We have people at the city that would be primarily responsible for completing those. And then the resources category gives you a picture of whether we've identified resources or that's something that still needs to be done.
Can I make one request and add it already? In the part about preventing homelessness, where it says advise on changes to city processes and identify broader problematic policies the city can advocate for change, could it say the city can change and advocate for change? I want to make sure that we're being explicit that we're also looking at our own internal policies and not just advocating externally. Just as an accountability measure for all of us, that, hey, we want to change things too, which I'm sure is the intention. Yeah, thank you. Anything? Also, pulse check with my colleagues if anyone has any other clarifying questions or, it's Councilor Dr. Wright.
Preparing for winter weather, I know that that's the primary strategy, but I think I would be remiss if I don't also mention that we have extreme summertime temperatures that also are very life-threatening to the people that are unhoused. So I know that like step 1 of the 3H task force recommendations was to have the low barrier shelter and winter weather response, but knowing how our frontline workers are also tasked with getting people out of extreme heat.
Should we just say extreme weather there?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if we're ready to say like all extremes, but I just want to speak it into existence here that if it's not a priority, that should be the next priority. And maybe it's the same facility.
I think that could actually be smart from a perspective if we say extreme weather and we're thinking about both heat or flooding, or there's all sorts of reasons that people get displaced, that might be more comprehensive.
But I think
Councilor
this-
Lake and
I think the strategy right now is time bound though, like October to March or something.
Yeah.
So obviously that's not 100-degree heat.
Yeah, I
although-
think the specific action item that they did to do the time bound, I think it's gonna be a resources conversation.
Sure.
And how you prioritize those.
could it be that we say extreme weather for kind of like that, how policy, like we're preparing it, acknowledging that maybe from a time perspective, we're initially looking at winter and then like looking at what those other circumstances are, scaling just as a kind of a next step that we might address in the future.
I was just going to suggest preparing for extreme weather be the how column or the high level, and then develop capacity to meet sheltering needs, but still leave it ahead of the winter weather season. So the time frame is still the same, but it expands it just a little bit and doesn't concentrate it on winter.
Except that the extreme heat's coming in like 3 months.
I know, but I just don't,
But
I
we
just
won't
don't
be
think it's
ready.
realistic.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I just, for public, right, because that's gonna be like, all right, we've made it through the freeze season, but now we have this extreme heat. So
Yeah.
just to set expectations.
It's just acknowledging to folks, we still,
And I don't
for
even-
our 2 viewers at home or whoever, right, there's cooling stations and things in the summer, it's not without resource. This is more of a conversation of
Right.
scaling that similar to what
So
happens in the winter.
the city right now is focused on October through March of 2025 to 2026 with this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that we are also aware that
Oh,
there's
yeah.
extreme heat that we need to have a plan for.
I think, just note, this is a small note, I think we've talked about, actually November 1 to March over.
Okay.
So I don't know if we're as explicit, I'm just mentioning that, like, there's I don't have a problem with October, but I just wanted to make sure as we're writing things, we're thinking about timeline. November 1, I think it was the date
November
that
to
was in my
March.
head, but
Okay.
but moving it back 30 days is not a huge deal, but it's.
As we stare down another polar vortex.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just think the window is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, anything else on this item before we have another slide?
Any other comments? So the next slide is public safety, and there was a lot that ended up in public safety. So that's page 2 of your work plan. And I'm gonna just pause talking just to give you all a second to look, especially at that how column on public safety, and then we'll go through it. just so people don't think that TGov is broken, I'll start talking, but you're welcome to keep reading on here. So again, public safety, recently, we had the announcement yesterday, and in the weeks prior, that animal welfare, is a public safety issue, and elevating that department to a standalone department to reflect that issue. And so you all really highlighted that as well in the retreat, and some very specific public safety concerns that came along with animal welfare. So there's essentially three approaches. One is looking at our regulations around ordinances. There are additional regulations besides the announcements that were mentioned yesterday that people would want to explore with you all. Looking at the investigative capacity of animal welfare, so there's a few ideas that the Public Safety Commissioner, along with Animal Welfare Services, is exploring to increase that capacity. I think some of you that are on the Animal Welfare Working Group got to hear about some of those ideas. But essentially, there's only so far an animal welfare officer can go in the investigation, so they either need additional certification themselves, or they need support from people who already have those credentials to go further in those investigations. And then obviously the last item on that is the new shelter is underway and under construction. The capital program and campaign to add those additional amenities is underway. And so those were the big high-level action items on animal welfare. Police recruitment and retention has been a priority probably for, I don't know, as long as I've been doing the retreat and prior to that.
1898.
Yes, so maybe 1998. I haven't been doing the retreat.
1898.
Oh, 1898.
Oh, you've been here quite that long.
I don't know. I have not been here since 1998.
Please
Yeah, the same years, as long as we can. So looking at ways and creative ways to increase officer longevity, because it's not just recruitment, it's also retention. You're familiar with the Pathways program that helps give credit for individuals coming out of their degree requirements. And then there's also every year they enter into collective bargaining negotiations. But going in with the goal really at that recruitment retention angle on those negotiations. Going one over, many of you are familiar with the fines and fees work. So as a reminder, there's $6.5 million funded in ARPA and CRF for pilot initiatives. And some of those things do have recurring cost. So really understanding what were the successful programs, which ones end up getting us the outcomes that you hoped to achieve, and identifying funding for those, whether that is local funding, private funding, or we did have some partnerships that potentially could come in, but all of those things have to be explored. The key part is, are you getting the outcomes that you would hope for on those programs? As part of that ARPA funds, they also did do a staffing study just to generally assess the staffing needs to make sure that we're providing the right kind of service for customers at the municipal courthouse. At the bottom, shifting gears, is strengthening relationships with our tribal nations. And so there is Amanda obviously is central to this work. And there were two key action items. So the first one is really around convening all of the partners together. And the second is really having that public framework and the transparency behind that framework on how there will be co-governance or jurisdictional cooperation. You all are also very familiar with the one next to it, alternative response methods. Expanding co-response models, looking at your metrics, how are these things decreasing reliance on other services, but yet maybe achieving better outcomes for the public. Co-response also can be included in 911 or additional subject matter experts in 911. And then you have pre-hospital working group working on the RFP for emergency medical response in general. And there's an item on your afternoon committee about an update there if you wanted to talk more there. And then the final one is, the mayor mentioned in the retreat, hey, there's national standards that really help us benchmark ourselves against our peers on being the safest big city in America. And so the mayor's office has agreed to research what those are so that we have good benchmarks to say, are the things that we've identified getting us to meet that goal? Does anybody have questions or thoughts on public safety? We did it perfect. The
Nailed it.
departments
You did
it.
enough. There's enough to look at that none of us can nitpick that much.
Yeah, no, I just put too many words.
Saving yourself for
Yeah.
later. I imagine.
The final page of your work plan goes over the last two priorities. Those are economic development and the Office of Children, Youth, and Family. In economic development, you all really talked about internal barriers, processes. Councilor Bush is nodding her head. This was her item in the retreat of making sure that we're doing everything we can do inside City Hall to make economic development not only safe, but also easy and easy to navigate. So you will see a couple of these buckets, those center two that really relate to that concept. And I think key to Councilor Bush's comments in the retreat were that we need to actually collaborate with the people experiencing our processes to develop these solutions. Another on the first one, I jumped around a little bit on the slide, but increasing access to the infrastructure. And so GIS mapping, you all had a presentation on our GIS capabilities recently, and seeking resources for infrastructure. And Shane can probably tell you a little bit more about those strategies if you would like to hear from him on that. And then the final was kind of a two-prong. You have a very specific, important event coming up with the Route 66 Centennial and identifying local support for events around that. But the broader issue was just tourism support in general. And what does that look like from a local level? And so we did try to make sure those were in two separate spots. They may influence one another, but one was more event-specific, the other is just a broader strategy around that.
I have something. In my mind, it's connected to economic development. Maybe it's in left field, or maybe I'm just trying to think outside of the box. Right now, with all the stuff, the instability happening, like with Doge, particularly on the East Coast, folks being laid off.
Being laid off here as well.
Correct.
Oh, okay, just to
Correct.
clarify.
I appreciate that. I wonder if there is an opportunity to recruit from people who are on the East Coast. I know New York has some initiatives saying, hey, if you're thinking about leaving DC.
I'm gonna do a small point of order. I agree. I don't know if that's like a budget priority thing, but there is a program I've referred to actually.
Yeah.
Oh, Erica's over there. There's a program called Work for America that, regardless of like what this administration on the federal level change look like, actually does help just historically place displaced federal workers that come with any kind of administration shift. So our HR department has been connected to that, though I don't know if that has budgetary impacts.
Right.
So, I don't know, are you suggesting adding that as a?
Yeah, I just think, is there an opportunity for Tulsa to shine as a place to relocate, given some of the instability that's happening right now in the country?
Don't we need housing inventory before we invite people?
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah.
We don't have I mean,
Yeah.
Sure.
we have a housing issue.
I think I can see it maybe.
Now,
that's something.
I will say that, yes, people, please move here if you're watching.
No.
But, yeah, we do have some challenges. I know that was actually a topic of conversation for a lot of folks at the U.S. Conference of Mayors even, just, folks coming out and how you're recruiting. I know that, I think Bloomberg Philanthropies is also starting to work on this to connect folks to opportunities that may actually come with money. I don't know if it's going to happen, but there might be an opportunity to, get some of that talent and have some resources that comes along with it, I would imagine, so.
Okay. Just put it out there.
No, it's,
Housing is a national question.
yeah, you're right, though, there
Not
are
just
definitely opportunities to recruit national talent. Yeah.
So how can that idea be put onto the board of recruiting talent when talent's available? I mean, I know there's lots of efforts out there. I don't know if it needs a separate place, but I think that we ought to
Yeah,
really discuss Counselor Archie's idea.
of course.
I-
I was trying to fit it into something that's already up there, but it doesn't fit in.
That's what I think one of the hard things I'm thinking through is like what's within the city scope, because there's recruiting, supporting, whether it's like chamber, is that like by way of the chamber and what we do over there? I'm just not sure where like that, I was thinking through too, like where's that bucket?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think what, if I may, maybe what we could consider is, as we think about all these priorities, if we were to identify any sort of skills gap that somebody with some specific talent that could, become, so maybe that's a way to think about against all these priorities when we find areas where there might be some very specific expertise.
Yeah.
I'm thinking particularly around within these priorities, I'm sure at some point is going to be interest in, navigating HUD, for example. And there might be somebody who knew HUD grants really, really well, who can help us do that to help us meet our affordable housing stuff or whatever. So
Yeah.
maybe there's just something to think about as a through line.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me just start decorated and Bengal, but as a quick note, I mean, we could add in, I didn't hear, I think it's just a question of like relative to the budget retreat, what
Sure.
this looks like, if we want to add in something that's like, right, just like talent, like recruitment. Yeah, Counselor Decorate.
Are we talking about specific to city staffing needs or
That's
to
the-
like
yeah.
the whole city MSA needs?
No, I thought about that. We are, later today, or maybe it's on this agenda item, there were vacancies in the finance department. I'm not sure if there are vacancies in other areas that could be.
Plenty of vacancies.
Yeah,
Yes, filled by.
I mean, we continue to have open positions in the city that we budget for. And then we know the labor and trades have been historically difficult to fill and keep, and we're just at a crossroads in a lot of departments, including the police department, labor and trades, where people are ready to retire, but we don't have, the attrition rate is greater than the recruitment and onboarding rate. So I think if it's something that we budget for in our budget, then it's definitely something that we should look at.
The workforce development side.
I just know since I've gone through several budget cycles now being on council, we continue to budget for positions we don't fill. And then that money gets moved. And then people ask, like, why are we moving money? And I think those are questions we'll be asking specifically around those finance positions. So as we're constructing the budget for this fiscal, but also for plan year, like who is doing the assessment to say, like, do we still need these positions? Do we need more positions? Because as we look at one-time expenses versus ongoing expenses, that tends to be where the conversation goes on our budget process. And to go back to what Councilor Lakin said, we have these piloted positions in our court that are grant funded, essentially, and that probably do need to come onto the general fund or be determined that there's other grants out there, or be determined, like, we piloted the program, we don't need this anymore. But I think we need to be looking at in other areas too, so that we get, what we're budgeting for is actual, what we are going to do.
Yeah, so
For
so what I'm
hiring.
hearing for like budget retreat purposes, potentially this is more about kind of like an internal look, but Counselor Bengal and then, are you, okay, Counselor Bengal?
I would think we're already doing that
Yeah.
through the different departments that have these staffing level needs, that they know what wells to dip into. Hopefully they're doing that, that we're not just sitting on positions where they're important or needful, or that we're not just sitting on them budgetary ones, if they're no longer needed. I would expect that when folks are out here recruiting, they would know what wells they can dip from for recruiting. So like Counselor Archie was talking about earlier, that's part of their job, is to go out and recruit folks. So I, as an Oklahoman, I would hope we would be looking within our state first to get people off unemployment or try and pull people back into the workforce. So that would be my first priority.
Yeah, Counselor Lake. Oh, sorry, I think I had done it then, Lakin, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So from just the inception and reading all of this, it looks like we are targeting areas that we are not fulfilling. The ACO for animal welfare. It looks like assess staffing study results to provide adequate staffing within the courthouse. There's TPD. I mean, this is all already on here that we are trying to fill positions that we need within this budget. So I'm not sure.
I see what you're saying, where it's kind of woven throughout instead of
Yeah,
explicit.
so I'm
kind
not
of-
saying, I'm just not sure why we need to add,
Right. Or
add,
like an item in economic development specifically. Well, anyways.
well, in housing.
Did you want to clarify something?
Yeah, just on the, a process and maybe how you weave this into your process. You can, and departments do, look at their vacancies, and they all probably have different they all have different recruitment strategies to fill their vacancies. But it seems like you're signaling on these ones that we know are high vacancy. I want to know a little bit more about their strategies, what's working from their perspective, what's not. I think that's a good conversation after the mayor's budget presentation, when you have your committees, to really hone in on that item. I don't know if we did it last year, but did it a couple of years ago to be able to dive in with those departments.
Right, and we
and-
learned some of the barriers were just we can't compete with the private sector.
Yeah,
And
and
we
it-
have to adjust like what we pay.
There are probably different barriers
Yeah.
for different departments, but I think you raising that here, sometimes when we put these retreat outcomes out there, people can say, well, I don't work on homelessness, or I don't work on this. This is a great way that now HR has identified, this is the way that I'm gonna contribute to this priority in partnership with the departments. So maybe they can come speak to that at a committee presentation
Thanks, that's
as
a
well.
good process idea. I appreciate that. Counselor Lakin?
Did you have something?
No, I thought she was
No.
gonna call on me.
I think
Don't
it's,
call
in my
I'm gonna
head.
start cold calling as the teacher maybe, yeah.
I think it's probably right, between the council and the mayor's office.
Yeah.
You know, the attitude, it seems, that we should be taking, at least to me, I'm not an HR guy at all, is we can't be reactive, we can just wait until applications come into us, but on some key positions, especially if a database is created by whomever, it doesn't really matter. If we can go out and find that talent that we really need. You know, we've been trying to get a grant writer, a citywide, system-wide grant writer. Well, maybe there's one out there now that was employed somewhere else, but now is not employed.
Absolutely.
And really knows the national landscape versus, you know, the landscape around here. So I don't know, my focus would be on going and finding the people that we need in certain vital roles,
Maybe
rather
this is
than
a-
just
Oh, sorry.
just hoping that they find us on the website.
Yeah, like the productivity. So maybe this
Yeah.
is a follow-up agenda item with HR, just to ask about those strategies, because I'm sure there's stuff that's already happening or that we, could support scaling.
Or needed resources
Okay.
as it pertains to the budget.
And I think having that conversation jointly with the mayor's office, since they have the power in this position.
So- yeah.
We're advisory, more or less.
So I'm wondering, do we think we need to, I don't know if that means then, I don't know if we need to add something to this so much as like an overarching, ensure staffing budget. Okay,
Yep.
okay. Sounds like, thank you, that was
But I think it was a
generous.
great idea
Yeah.
and thought.
Yes, yeah. All right, anything else on economic development?
Did we decide?
It sounds like we're not explicitly adding this in, but there's some
we're not.
follow-up items. And I think Councilor Dunn found that good middle ground of, hey, it's kind of woven throughout, staffing's implicit.
Maybe we need a hard head on it.
Right, yeah, how do you
Instead of
understand
letting the
it?
Yeah.
departments do it.
Yeah, I think,
It hasn't worked.
I'll just leave that with Sarah as a follow-up agenda item with HR about
Got it.
workforce
Needs,
development and recruitment and needs, yeah. Yes.
Sorry,
Councilor
one
Michael.
more thing.
Yeah.
When we're talking about infrastructure, I think that's gonna be key, where those infrastructure investments can be key to opening what previously were challenging developments.
Yeah,
So I think that's all over the city. I know you have some in your district, I have some in mine. And I've had some conversations with some developers that feel like they could have developed property if they had some infrastructure dollars to help them get across that finish line. But I think that's really the challenge, and I think being strategic about where we're developing and making those investments can lead to even broader development in housing.
And if I may on that, Councilor Bingle, I think you're spot on, and the GIS mapping is part of the making sure we have the information around that, right, to understand where's the system close, where might we need significant investment to really get across the line, but the seeking additional resources is about that as well. That's somewhat from the private sector. It's also about thinking about how can we work with state partners
Right.
or with federal partners, right, to bring, especially in the federal case, federal dollars back to Tulsa to get some of those projects up and on the line. Both in the conversation I just heard, but then especially on the Route 66 piece, something I see here too is we're thinking about what's going on right now, but we're also thinking about being opportunity prepared, and that's really what infrastructure is about, right? Being ready for, today it's everything going on with DOGE, as Councilor Archie pointed out, but there's always going to be some opportunity just around the corner, and that infrastructure investment is about making sure we're ready for that opportunity. when it comes.
Absolutely, totally agree.
Never recover from referencing a meme coin. I had Councilor Dectorated and then Councilor Harper.
Thanks for bringing this up, Counselor Bingle. I would also just ask, as we're looking at this strategy, to develop some nimbleness, because the city has some funded infrastructure, but it's 5 years from now, and the interest in those spaces is today. And so there's several parcels in my district where we are losing out. We're like on our third go-around with developers, simply because the infrastructure that's planned is not planned by the city to come on until like 2030. And if we could be more nimble, maybe look at, and we've done it with other things, right? We're projects more ready today, and so we shift funding priorities, knowing that we'll backfill. I think we could accelerate some of the housing that needs to come on, and some of this commercial development, rooftops and commercial, and not just be so rigid, because I do think we're losing out and we're frustrating people. And so I'd be happy to meet with Jean and some others to talk more specifically about these. There's like an area of my town, in my part of town, where people are ready to go, but like the city's not ready to go. And it's not that the city hasn't planned, it's they've planned for 5 years from now. And if we could like accelerate that, we'd be done over there, and 5 years from now be somewhere else where they're ready.
So would that be a part to add to where it talks about creating GIS mapping, identifying infrastructure availabilities? Would that be about like maybe to make it like what you're both saying explicit about
Timing.
Identifying optimal timing with that for those, okay,
How we're prioritizing the funding of infrastructure.
okay.
And putting some more flexibility
Yeah.
in when the private sector's ready to go. I don't think the answer can
Not
be from
being
us
time
like,
rigid.
could you wait for us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand, how.
So maybe there's something about overlaying that with capital improvement lists, or,
Exactly.
just kind of getting a broader sense of how does all of that pair up and the timing. Okay. Anything else? Oh, so, I'm so sorry, Councilor
I'm
Harper.
fine. I just
Yeah.
wanted to add, certainly the infrastructure and the planning, all of that is important, but I also think we've got to have to acknowledge that there is a good avoid network that exists in development. And that if you are not a part of that network, you will meet barriers. And so certainly if you are a smaller developer and you're not, a part of the club. So I think that's something that we have to explore as well.
I hope we're not doing that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, I
I hope
think,
we're not doing that.
Guarantee you.
I think
we are.
that's part and parcel
I think it's
as
just,
to the neglect of
irrespective
certain
of what the city's
districts.
doing.
I really think
Yeah.
that that has contributed to the blight.
Well, I think it's that certain people know how to work certain systems and other people don't.
And certain people can make a call and
Yeah.
the gate's open.
Yep.
And certain people,
Yep.
no, we're not going to be able to do
agree.
that, so.
Yeah.
So could that be accomplished by making sure we have a broad representation when we talk to those stakeholders in our
Yeah,
processes?
I think that's a
With
good
that.
idea.
It's a start.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, I think that'd be great about being explicit about who's being engaged and that it's a really broad scope of, yeah, like, yeah.
Just on your action plan, you don't have
Yes.
specific process things right now because you have that stakeholder
Right.
group, so that's.
But we
where
could say
probably
like
could fit there.
representative, like stakeholder group, authentically representative. those words are okay, right? I was gonna say diverse. Okay. Are we, too soon? Okay, we are on, oh,
Wait,
Counselor Bangor.
I'm going to chime in one more time, sorry. On the Route 66 Centennial, and I think everybody's aware that I've asked for the 10% increase in the hotel motel tax allotment to our tourism group so that they can help move forward some of the stuff on this, and then come back and evaluate what that looks like. Because as we've discussed many times, that convention hotel, and I'm sorry, I'm like really struggling with this headache. As that convention hotel comes out of the ground, we're gonna be able to leverage that in this discussion, and I think this would be smart of us to do this for 2 years, come back and reevaluate it and see if we want to move forward or make it a permanent implementation, or if we need to reel it back. I think there's some further discussion about this, but I think we all know how significant this is going to be to Tulsa, so I just want to make sure that we don't depend on others to do our tourism for us, where the funds may or may not be available, because not everybody's going to support us. It might be.
Counselor
It's on
Bangor.
that.
What's the
That's
timing
good.
on that, Counselor?
Well,
I mean, are we behind?
we have a targeted date for the signature event of May 30th.
Of 2026.
Correct.
So we're
Um,
like 14 months away from that.
Yeah, so that's why,
So we
I
need
keep
to already be-
saying it almost ad nauseum, but also, this would also help fund some events in districts where you're not along that route as well. Because some folks aren't going to be overly excited about it. They may go to other districts for that.
They may want to see
specifically.
Yale between 81st and 91st.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Let's not
but-
go that far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
potentially.
Just put a water slide on it and they'll definitely.
Sure, good things happen.
That's why I said, I think it's really important, and I hope we realize the economic impact it'll have for us as a city as a whole.
So when you,
Yeah, well, I'm just worried, like, time is of the essence, so it's in our budget discussions, but it sounds like kind of what you're talking about is beyond general fund budget. And so, is there,
That might fall
Is-
into what's like state, like what the budget appropriations advocacy looks like, which I know has been tough on
but I
this
think
topic.
what I hear the counselor saying is we shouldn't just only be waiting for them to come to the table, we need to have our own plan.
Right.
So is it the Route 66 commission that's working on that, or is there a group of counselors that are in a working group to specifically try to do this? Because I'm looking at our friend Renee over your shoulder, and 14 months to plan a signature event is real tight.
Renee and I have been collaborating
Right.
very closely on this, and the Route 66 Commission has some funding of
Okay.
its own that it has set aside for this, and the ARPA working group has set aside $200,000 of
Okay.
beautification directed toward that. Now, I don't know what the constraints of that funding were specifically, Counselor Lakin, because I think
Just-
you were on that.
beautification along the route.
Okay,
Anything
was
that
it
we can-
specific, like it had to be, like litter, it could be for just general use, or?
Well, I think it's a pretty broad and general definition of beautification. Yeah, not just litter pickup.
So does the small
Instead.
budget committee need to like have this on our agenda soon? I would say the next time we meet, so that we can really look at ARPA, look at what general fund asks are
Yeah,
coming.
no,
and
that's
let's-
smart.
Yeah, this is
And
very
let's
time
like,
sensitive.
yeah, let's,
I just
I
want to
know
make
you're
sure.
not on there, but.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're positioning ourselves.
Okay, let's
to be
put that on our
successful.
agenda for our
Yeah.
next meeting.
All right, Counselor Lakin?
So when you say 10%, just go through the mechanics of that. What is it now? What do you want it to be?
So
Or,
currently, I think the allocation is 45% of our hotel motel tax, and we just want to raise it to 55.
So just going 10 percentage points.
Correct.
For
Yeah,
Just for a
whatever, it's
two-year
two-year
period,
period.
temporarily, two-year period, have our Visit Tulsa organization come back and give us what the return of investment was on that.
So like with a sunset date, like we're doing
Right.
this, okay.
Right, and that's why we proposed it as only a two-year increase.
Do we
So
want,
it would put us in a position to be successful.
And that's
And the
separate,
money
though,
would
from-
come back to the city of Tulsa so that we could determine how to spend it versus
Right,
having the
Well, don't we also-
chamber do it.
correct.
Yep.
I think the other element though is both there's the percent, but also looking at the hotel motel tax overall rate itself, right? So there's two
Exactly.
pieces
Two
there.
things.
Because I know that, I know in the comparison, I think Oklahoma City allocates 75%, if I remember.
Well, and they also
if I
just
remember the-
increased.
If
Yeah,
I
they were like
remember
at
the
9
numbers
or
correctly.
something.
Because
Yeah,
I
they
know,
just went to 9% overall.
I think the mayor and I had a conversation comparatively about Oklahoma City
9.25.
and Tulsa, and I was like, we had a slight disagreement. I thought it was an apples to oranges comparison, because I didn't feel like we were the same size city. We didn't have the number of hotel rooms. But I do agree that at some point, when that convention hotel starts coming out of the ground, we need to have that discussion about the increase in hotel motel time.
Yeah, I think that's definitely on the table for this year. Councilor Lee can finish, and then for time reasons, move us on.
Yeah, I don't really know how to slice and dice it up, because I do believe that the chamber and the visitor and tourism group is doing a really, really fantastic job. I understand that we've got this thing on top of Route 66, so I'm just trying to, we do need to have a more robust discussion, even like a temporary addition to the hotel motel tax, just so that we could get through and do some of the things that you and other counselors envision. So, yeah, I just think you have to broaden it, make it as broad as possible, if it's temporary or if it's permanent, and just figure out what's most feasible and reasonable. And gets you the kind of, what amount of money you need as well, right?
I wouldn't
Generally.
say, I would say, Renee, come up here, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Well, we're just at 11.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
So,
We're getting off.
yeah.
can I, while we're coming to, can I just clarify on the small budget committee item? So it would be an understanding of any available funding sources, correct?
Yeah.
And then if you were further exploring this temporary percentage adjustment, you would also want to know the implications of the pot you're taking it from.
Right. But I
Correct,
think
because it's not,
it's-
it wasn't, unless you do a temporary increase, there is a different pot that you would be moving it
Give take.
from.
Right,
I'm
and
just
just
naming-
general fund impacts.
But I'm just naming that there's two parts here, both actually increasing the hotel motel tax.
Correct. And I
Which has
think,
been a discussion with, don't worry, like with hoteliers, this won't be a surprising thing to be saying right
Yeah.
now at this table. There's that discussion to be more in line with our peer cities, and then separately also that temporary increase of the sunset date.
Of
to-
the allocation regardless of what
Yeah.
the percentage of the hotel motel
Yeah.
is. And then the general fund implications on this table that we just got, right? Funding to be identified.
Okay, yeah.
Can I ask a
And
real
our-
quick question?
Yes,
It's
Councilor
kind of a
Gilbert.
point of order question. So we're talking, are you wanting to put this on as a priority of increasing the hotel motel tax? And then, but,
I think it falls within, it says rate and balancing, right? Or what do you think?
okay.
Well, it says
that was the
Centennial event.
appropriate dollars.
2026.
centennial event, identifying funds from, I'm sure anybody would be happy to have any source of funds identified for the
Exactly.
centennial event. And then the secondary item is looking at that more long-term question. Do you want to adjust within the percentage? Do you want to look at an
The overall.
increase overall? That's what that second bucket is, without putting a solution right there, right now, because you need more information in your
Did
small
that-
budget committee.
Yeah, but I mean, at least putting it on here and not starting the discussion now.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
that's what I wanted to.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Was there anything that
So
you're
it's all-
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
if you could
It
just
it
kind of
could be
summarize.
another
Yeah.
agenda item
So
to
like
have
keep
those
it with
discussion during
love
budget.
Twitter sized, because we gotta.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll just break it into two things. So,
What? Just the agenda, I just want to make sure we're watching our agenda item
Yeah, keeping it in terms of.
Right,
city
that's what I was
specific.
trying to.
and who the discussion.
Can we
is
just bring
listed with.
Renee back
Yeah.
to talk specifically?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be better for everyone at this
Yeah,
table.
I don't take issue with that at all.
Great, thank you, Renee.
I will be back.
Yes, you will be
We will
back.
schedule you to have a
Renee,
full
but thank you
agenda
for-
item.
All right. Now for the,
Sorry.
no, we can move on to
Open meetings.
Slide
the most critically
four.
important upstream investment we can make.
So the Office of Children, Youth and Family was the final
Investing in
item
children.
Really? Whose item is
That's
this?
nice to know.
on,
Should be all of our items.
Yes.
so I will just very briefly from the retreat, the next steps on this are really under that implementation plan. All of the next steps really involve the structure and setting up a work plan for that office. And so that's what you see in addition to the Children's Cabinet initiative. I am obviously not the subject matter expert on this item, and you do have another item related to this. So I think I would turn it over to those if you wanted to further explore this item.
I might just suggest, since I think it has its own,
It
is
has
that
its own
right?
item,
Yes, it
yeah.
has its own
Yeah.
item, so we
Yeah,
can.
I think what I'm thinking is with the upcoming agenda item, we kind of cover some of like what helps create space for this broad scope a bit, and then we have that more explicit item after that, so, okay. I think that all seems like a good plan. Okay, all right.
So are we moving to the next item?
We are.
Okay.
Um,
That's a good job, Sarah.
yeah.
Can we,
All right, thank you, Sarah.
can we wrap up on
And
next,
thank you, Shane.
next phases of this document, though? So what happens? You're going to memorialize this and,
So we'll laminate
Uh-huh.
this.
yeah.
She's
A head
not
start.
trying.
She loves the lamination.
I do love
Yeah.
it. You also can have one.
Oh,
You can
And
use it
I
as
know.
like your placemat or something.
And then, I mean, once you pass the budget, you
Your
can
mouse
keep your
pad.
laminated copy. So we'll laminate this, we'll make there were pretty minor adjustments to the work plan that we'll make and distribute it. I do think it would be a good idea for Marissa and I to talk to mayor staff about, as we move throughout the year, how do we update on the progress of our priorities, not just right before the next retreat, but throughout the year, and make sure that we're staying up to date on those. So potentially your next, the organization of the city, I think probably does have one of those reorganizations, was towards the eye of how are we making sure that we're staying accountable to our priorities. So that probably leads into that item.
Yes.
There.
Great, that sounds like a good segue. So we're on agenda item 5, discussion with representatives from the mayor's office and finance department regarding fiscal year 24-25 budgetary impacts of the proposed reorganization, a summary of implementation plan, and anticipated timeline for other associated change management impacts, including but not limited to workflow processes, formal personnel reporting changes, and future budgetary requests. Other than discussion, no action will be taken. I'm about to do a very teacher, like, take one and pass it down. What I'm passing down, and this is in the backup as well now, is like literally just an email I sent Friday of proposed like outcomes for this time, acknowledging that, like, and just kind of setting a framework of, a lot of this is about forecasting more than precision, like, I fully acknowledge, especially this item on here, that, you know, we're in, the mayor's office, council, everyone's in a budget process right now, so not all of this is 100% delineated, but what I'm hoping we can do with this item that'll tee us up also for the next one is building shared understanding and equipping the council with information to both make informed votes on these related items and inform constituents on how the restructure aligns with those mayoral goals and those mayor council budget retreat goals we just looked at. That could include, right, conveying projected timelines administratively, knowing that, you know, like with certain reorg things, there's executive orders that'll be coming to the council, potential budget amendments, employee reclassifications, things like that, and then kind of looking at those budgetary impacts and staffing impacts from there. I just like laid that all out. We don't have to sit here and go line by line through those goals, but this is just kind of broad scope, again, acknowledging that there's probably not extreme precision about exact like dates or exact numbers because these things are actively happening right now, but I'm hoping that we can get some aligned understanding. So I will pass it over to, I know we just had Mike Miller join us from the mayor's office as well, so I'll pass it over there or to the mayor.
So maybe I'll get us started. I thank you, Counselor, for putting this on the agenda, and I am aware of some of the interest in, you know, how we're thinking about restructuring things and however we're going to do that. I understand with past restructures, there's a whole lot that came down and changes that need to be made and that type of stuff. So the first thing I'll say is we did, I guess it was about a month ago, send you all a reporting structure that's different that I think is effective in the email I sent March the 9th, I think, so in a couple of days or something like that. That is slightly different than what you all will get in the creation of new divisions that would have triggered, for example, you guys taking a vote on something. So I saw the reminding me about the city charter at the bottom. I appreciated that. And so you'll get that when that comes down. The changes that we intend to make will have a pretty nominal impact, and Christie can talk, very small impact on the budget. And our goal, and you guys correct me where I'm wrong, is that just about all that will be reflected in the budget proposal you'll get when it comes down, right? So not like a whole bunch of changes in between, but those changes will be reflected. Then I think that makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of, obviously making sure we're very coordinated and accurate when we come down and talk about that, so it's not a bunch of ones and twos. But I think it also leads to a lot of stability in how we begin to work through any changes. I'll also say, just kind of working from number one, I won't go all the way down, but just a couple of reflections before I do turn it over to Mike and Christie and the team. We are, and you'll find, are in a budget environment that's not as good as we would hope. But as I'm looking at, our mayor council retreat priorities, and I'm thinking about the last couple of months, I think we are still finding ways to make progress against these priorities. I think the reporting structure that we send down is a reflection of us delivering on those priorities. The budget proposal and the shift in departments that you all have to approve will be reflective of helping us meet the needs along these priorities. Everything from homelessness and, how we've staffed the mayor's office and the housing EO, just to streamline processes, which was on the other council retreat document, is reflective of that. Emily Hall's work and working with our partners in the homelessness space is in service of that. I think we found shelter space for over 1,200 people during the winter storm, and that happened because, we all collectively, it's been a priority of this council for a long time. We're very intentional about it. I would say the same thing on the public safety side. It's not just about having a commissioner of public safety, but we are leaning in to deal with some of the low hanging fruit around animal welfare services, obviously, a priority of this council. And so I think the city that's going to help deliver those. So to that shared understanding, I think some of that I hope you've gotten a little peek into it, but as you get that stuff in the next few weeks, I think it'll be even clearer. On the projected timelines, so I'll just give you a little insight on where we are from a budget standpoint, because I think it will give some insight as to what you can expect from a timeline perspective. So in February, we had every department come in for a 90-minute presentation. That presentation was looking at the plan year, looking at the budget requests from the department heads, and then asking them to identify areas to help us, find savings in the budget. So where we are now is in the next week, we'll be communicating back with department heads about where we are, because I want to just say how much I appreciate the work of all the department heads and really working with us to find ways to deliver on these things, to make the most responsible cuts we can, to make sure that does not include cutting people, for example, but not hesitating to deliver on these important priorities of the mayor and the council. And so what's going to happen is we're going to now be communicating back with department heads on where we are on that stuff. And so when you all get the budget presented to you, it won't be a surprise to department heads what comes down to you. So I think even some of the issues in the past of like how crazy that process is now, I can't promise you it's not going to be crazy at all, but what I can promise you is you all are going to get information that the department heads fully know is coming. That's going to maybe answer some of the questions that weren't answered before. You will certainly have new and very insightful questions to come, but you will have in your hand not just a budget, not just where we feel like we have to make reductions in the budget, but also, you know, your opportunity cost, so you get an idea, so you can still see that we're going full speed ahead. So that'll happen by the end of next week, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at least on the department head side, which puts us, you know, I think right on schedule to get things delivered down to the council on, yeah, mid-April, is that right? All right, well, nobody can, sometime soon. But what we can do, what I will commit to, just April 16th. What we can commit to, though, I know there's a lot of interest in where priorities might be for folks and how we're invested in things. And so I know I spend time with each counselor individually, so I'm happy to walk every counselor in those individual meetings through where we've been. If you have, ahead of those meetings that we have one-on-ones, if you have a particular interest in a department or a set of departments, let me know, and I will make sure I come with that information. And we're certainly, you know, our office will certainly be very much willing to walk anybody through kind of the process thus far, what we got, even ahead of getting things down. Just knowing that every question you have may not be fully answered until we have that final presentation. Let's see here. The forecasted budget amendments, I'll let Christie and Mike speak to that, but I don't think you can expect to see many of those. And I don't even know one off the top of my head other than a measly old $115,000 one that I'm still hoping to work out. But we should. No.
First, it's about my footnote in this email, then that I'm kidding. Go on.
No. I'm just saying that I said that, and I want you to be accurate and say there is something I do care about. But let's see. I'm saying, Mike, is there anything that, before we get questions over, I don't know if there's anything else that you or Christie would add, and then I may just let you all hit us with questions.
Well, on the budget amendments, I assume the question is kind of more around like the fact that we've had to move capital projects year after year, because those are life-to-date funds, and so they didn't just move with the operating. So this is a much smaller reorganization of the capital, and so I feel like there'll be a lot less. And then just on the operating side, again, it's a smaller move. Okay. And we've had some practice in the recent years, so I think we're getting better. So I know that occasionally we come back to you with like, oh, we accidentally didn't move this money and we need to move it. But we do try to keep track of what, like a little section is moving to try to get all that money moved, but occasionally there are misses. And so we do have budget amendments. But overall, I see this as a much smaller reorganization than some of the ones that we've seen in the past. So I think that we'll be okay there. I don't anticipate a lot of budget amendments. Certainly no budget amendments as it relates to this fiscal year.
Okay. That's super helpful context.
Yeah.
Did you have something?
No, I mean, the idea is that when we present the new budget, it'll all be aligned. And we hope to not have any amendments related to it because it'll all be part of that overall budget presentation.
Yeah, we are trying to make sure we catch all the items like in a section that might be budgeted for in a different section, like, you know, maybe centrally, like cell phones or something might be budgeted outside of a group section. And then you had about vacant roles and whether the dollars are shifted elsewhere. Everything that goes with a division or like a section is being moved. So like in my office or in my department, I have the OCDO being moved, and whether the position's filled or vacant, those dollars are planning to go with into the new area. So not abolishing or getting rid of them just because of the reorg.
Okay, that's really helpful. Do people have some follow-up questions related to? Okay, I think thank you, that was just such a helpful level set, and I think leads us perfectly into the 115,000 on the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, ordinance amending the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $115,000 between departments and account groups within the general fund, Office of Children, Youth, and Families. And I know there were kind of some specific clarifying questions that folks had, which I think one of them actually touched on. I'm just gonna name like the two that I kind of recall being inquiries. One related to that these dollars were coming from vacant finance roles. Are those ones, are these same dollars for another year coming from elsewhere, or are those roles not necessary? Or like, that was kind of a curiosity within the budget I'd heard get surfaced.
So,
Go ahead.
so for fiscal year '25, just in the finance department, we have had vacancy, and we know that I just served those up as a funding rather than trying to fund it from fund balance. So it isn't intended to mean that we're abolishing anything in the finance department. That's just where we're finding the money for this fiscal year without dipping into fund balance. We just knew that we had those savings. And that is not expected to be where that's funded from in the next fiscal year. It's just being a part of the whole budget that's being put together, funding that contract.
I know it's part of also we're seeing the mayor's office hit the ground running, which is definitely appreciated for outcomes for families. Are there other clarifying questions, Councilor Dr. Wright?
Yeah, is Counselor Bush gone? Because I think she had some questions last week.
I know, I don't.
I think she had to go to another meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember what her questions were, I just remember she had them. So that gets us to June 30th. And then I didn't bring my notes from last time, but Mayor, you had said that the 115 gets us to June 30th, and then.
Yeah, and I misspoke on something. We're gonna fund it at a level, my proposal will be to fund the Office of Children and Families at a level for the fiscal year. So that would be 275 next year.
From July 1 to June 30.
Correct,
275?
yes, yep, 275,
Okay.
which would be a full year. Last time I told you we'd be funding the balance of 275.
Yes.
So that was my mistake, and I apologize for that. And that'll be part of the budget we send down to you, so it'll come out of the general fund to do that. And I think Christie did a good job. We didn't, quote unquote, make room for it by like getting rid of things other places, but I do intend to send you a budget proposal that has it as part of the budget.
Okay, and it'll be for the full fiscal.
That's correct.
And are there still private dollars that come in to match the 275?
So the way that I think about the private dollars that we're gonna get, so those private dollars will go to do a lot of the work 275 is not enough to do all the things that need to happen, right? This is the city's portion of creating the office. I think that we're in an environment where there are, I think there's tens of millions of dollars are going to be invested in improving outcomes for young people in this community. And the office, with that kind of staffing structure, that essentially we're outsourcing, will, work through those partnerships to get the work done on the ground, is how it quantify that. So I don't expect, nor am I seeking, somebody to give the city like 275 for us to go to spend the way that we're spending here. All the money that's attracted by would be the work that Impact Tulsa and Partners will be doing on our behalf out in the community. So I don't see us taking in grants, but the work that happens in the community will be significantly subsidized by philanthropic investments.
So I see Deputy Mayor Reyes at our table. You're the lead staff member in the city over this work, and then it'll be mostly outsourced contractors. Could you just talk a little?
Well, Impact Tulsa will be a contractor, hopefully will be a contractor to run the office and also the children's cabinet. And then as the work plan, as we engage with partners, as we engage with community to understand needs, although we track a lot of this already, we'll figure out what resources we need to implement a program, a service, a resource, a better efficiency connection between resources. So that would be a combination of things that we could do or things that we could find resources to contract with partners for.
I also think that, part of this, and, I mentioned it in the chair, vice chair meeting this morning, is Impact also because they, have those partnerships in a repository for a lot of information, can also be an informer to us on like what we need to do internally from a city policy standpoint. I think some of the conversations that have been had about how do we mitigate the challenges around evictions. That was stuff that Impact Tulsa helped, bring to the forefront, which also helps us think about how are we investing in, reducing chronic absenteeism, which those things are very much tied, and we understand that now, which I think will likely have some impact on how we do policy here at the city. So, I think there's like this, working to impact student outcomes on one end, on the other end, helping us identify areas where we might think about how are we spending our money to invest in children and youth and families here at the city. And so I think there's like a twofer there. And I think that this year the chamber will go to Salt Lake City for an inner-city visit, if I'm not mistaken. In South Salt Lake, Mayor Wood there actually created a very similar office in a very similar way. And so it would be an opportunity to see another city that's doing something very similar. But if you look at a place like there's Dallas, there's Austin, there's San Antonio, there's Memphis, they all have somewhat similar setups, not always directly connected with the city, but are driving policy in the city. The work in Texas right now, for example, that completely restructured community college funding, completely restructured K-12 funding, actually was generated through a very similar partnership. And so that's the reason why teachers in Texas, some of them are making almost $100,000 a year, because it was, I know we kind of say, what does data matter and all this kind of stuff. It actually does inform how you can drive policy in very
Are you
innovative
talking
ways.
about the Child Poverty Action Lab that Mayor
So
Mayor
they're
in Dallas?
yeah, they're connected to it. It's actually Commit in Dallas is the organization, yeah. But yes, they're very much connected to all, that's exactly right.
Sorry, I was thinking about that ex-Pizza
Yep.
Hut CEO who, for
Yep.
your point, from the mayor's office established that kind of
That's right.
work around child poverty.
That's right.
Okay, that's helpful.
So it's, and what I'll do, I know you all have some time between now and maybe when you're making that decision, but we'll also send some of those examples. But I will say this, Deputy Mayor and I were in New York with maybe 13 mayors from across the country, there with the Harlem Children's Zone and the National League of Cities, talking about this. How are cities invested in place-based work to improve outcomes for young people? So this is the direction in which cities actually change the lives of young people and vulnerable families. And I think we are, in some ways, at least in the kind of first class of cities that are getting there. But this is it. The Harvard, the Ed Lab at Harvard, the same thing they're talking about right now. And a lot of them are calling saying, hey, what is the city of Tulsa doing, because we were starting to hear about this stuff. So I will say, I think what you're going to get as we go in these different spaces, I know some of you may or may not participate in National League of Cities, but they're going to be very interested in how we're doing here. And I think you'll find that a lot of them are going to be really excited to chat with counselors about how this is working in Tulsa.
So I have, just so people know who's in the queue, Councilors Archie, Gilbert, Hall Harper, and Dr. A. Unless anyone's was a direct add-on to. Okay.
Sure, no,
Councilor Archie, go ahead.
very quick, I think you answered one of the questions. Obviously, this year it's being funded out of finance, but you said moving forward, it'll be just from the general fund. The adjustments or cuts that you're going through the departments to make, you're going to be keeping, you're not firing staff, or, okay, that's great. And then I got some questions on, that were to me about Impact Tulsa. Just, I think the organization is wonderful. Maybe just a little bit of education. Obviously, you have a preference and believe that they are the organization that can best facilitate this work. Is there an RFP process, or what sort of evaluative process do we go and we say, who are the organizations that could do the work? Is there a vetting, or is it because you have a preference for it, they get a...
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We did a sole source contract, and it's not about a preference. Before I got elected, this is the kind of work I did across the country. So I've seen all these kind of organizations in every state across America and did policy work to that end. And Impact Tulsa is not only a local organization, but it is part of a national organization. And I'm not the only person who thinks that organization is good at doing this type of stuff. They have investments that come from everywhere, from the Balmer Group in Washington State to the Obama Foundation with the My Brother's Keeper work. So it's not a preference deal. It's a recognition based on all my experience doing this type of work, and looking at how the characteristics of organizations that can play the specific role, in my view, there is one. There's this term that's, you talk about doing kind of place-based cradle to career work. There are some organizations, and this is not knocking any of them, by the way, who maybe do a little more in the early childhood space, or more in the higher education space, or more in the K-12 space, or whatever the case may be. You're looking for an organization that is really thinking about that across the entire spectrum and how we're doing that. And so they are unique in that way. And so it's less about a preference. It is more so rooted in the kind of organization that is, and how that organization looks against other organizations that do this type of work across the country.
Their expertise.
That's right.
Yeah, I would just tack on to that just as a clarifying thing. When it comes to having someone who's able to do collective impact, that's a neutral convener, has the like existing contracts with school districts, et cetera,
Right.
there are parallel organizations in our state, which is just the reality, yeah.
Great.
Ready to-
No, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, we have Counselor Gilbert.
Well, so, Ms. Reyes, thank you for clarifying one of my questions, because as we, as counselors for different districts, going out and meeting with residents, our communities, we're going to be asked, different questions on how things work. And so I know that that's going to be a question popping up as, hey, tell us more about this new office. So having that clarification helps a lot. And Mayor Nichols, I just want to say thank you for putting this together, this initiative, because as Councilor Bellis and I both, being previously in the schools, seeing, the hardships that our families are going through, had been going through, still going through, it's very frustrating that we, as city officials, we can't help. So, and as a parent facilitator, former parent facilitator, it was very frustrating because I saw them firsthand, seeing the homelessness, seeing the truancy issues, anything else, the discipline, or I'm having it right now, ADD moment. So, but just having this office to get to the root source of the problems of what we're having in our schools and why we're having that deficit of children falling into the cracks, not being successful in school, making sure that we are there to lend a helping hand, to make sure that they know that we're here to help. Just the report that just came out this morning about Tulsa Public Schools having the 45% chronic absenteeism, it's concerning. So what can we do for those families that are going through that issue? What services do they need? Wraparound services. So I know that that's not addressed in our court system. So, but what can we do away from the courts? Because that's not where it should be. I mean, we should be there offering those wraparound services, which was what I was trying to get across the last time, how we can help those families. Is it transportation? Is it mom, dad has 3 other jobs that, they can't wake up to get the children to school on time? Is it a transportation issue? I mean, just not having a vehicle, but buses. So, I mean, there's just so much going into kids having a harder time these days than what we had, and I hate to say that, than what we had when we were growing up. But times have changed, and I'm very glad to see that we're finally getting something to help address those issues.
I'll say too, I want every counselor to also see Impact Tulsa as a resource. You got questions about whether it's the data side or approaches or anything like that, and then also the opportunity to, for all of us. I mean, like I was a practitioner in this world, but like I still have a ton to still learn. I mean, what I hope is it's an office that can be leveraged for a lot of things, including curiosities of all of us on how we meet some of the challenges that we see in neighborhoods across this city. And so, in addition to the deputy mayor, the team there now, after this, they are part of, this family of the city, and so should be leveraged and utilized to, for questions, approaches, things that you all, questions may have as counselors, questions I'll have as mayor about what we should be doing differently and how we work with folks. I hope they are also leveraged in that way from the folks around this table.
Can I just say one more thing before I give up my spot? So what I would like from this conversation is if we have quarterly reports from what we're finding of what's happening in the schools. We all have schools in our districts, and what we can do as counselors to get into those schools to see what we can do to help. Almost every school has a PTA, I hope. If they don't, they should. Whether, that's something that we take on as a extra burden for us is to help work with schools to put those parent-teacher associations together so that the parents are at the schools and the parents are in the classrooms helping other students, not just their own. So if we could get those quarterly reports, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'd
So
love to
that we
talk with
can-
you about what you need, and
Okay.
if that's never been a data set you had before, I think this is a great step, so.
Thank you.
All right, I have Councilor Hall Harper.
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on what Councilor Gilbert was saying, as far as all of those issues that you mentioned. I want to throw food insecurity in there as well.
Yes, definitely, 100%.
Huge problem, and it does have an impact on school attendance.
That's why they can't focus.
They can't focus because they don't have healthy food options, and so, after the announcement, I reached out to you. You said there was going to be a cabinet. I asked to be a
Children's
part.
cabinet,
Yeah, a children's cabinet. Those are opportunities, I think, that those of us who are interested. And when I asked, you said absolutely, we'd love to have you be a part of that. So, I thank you for that. I'm excited about Impact Tulsa. You mentioned how impactful they have been, and we've experienced that on the council in engaging with them on again, the issue you mentioned as far as truancy in school and what are some of the causes of that. I know, to your point, what you were saying as far as they're part of a national network. I'm excited about that because they have access to best practices of things that are being done throughout the nation that we can then duplicate. We don't have to make it up. We could look at other communities and say, hey, very similar statistics, very similar dynamics. This could work for Tulsa without doing a lot of implementation and then failing, right, and then learning. We can. That's what I love about best practices. We can avoid the pitfalls. My question, you mentioned that a lot of the funding, which makes sense, and what I love about it, we have a lot of monies coming even philanthropically or organizationally or corporately, whatever the case may be. Impact Tulsa, is it a nonprofit?
Yes,
It is a
ma'am.
nonprofit. So will those funds then rest, whatever they may be focused or dedicated to, rest within their infrastructure, or is that something that we as a city will have to accept?
My hope, this is probably a conversation, there's probably a chance for both those things to happen. My preference would be, if we can get this community to a place where we're able to align resources behind strategies that work, right? And we know what those things are. I don't think that money has to come to us to do that. I would almost slightly prefer it didn't.
Me too.
But as long as we can say, hey, here's the direction this community is going in, here are the investments being made, I think that's the best way to go. So, I mean, if
Just a
there's somebody who
question,
just wants to give us money, I mean, I won't tell them no, but.
Yeah, it's definitely more efficient.
And that was my
I mean,
question.
how
Where
much
would it
it
rest? Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And I'll just mention, just as a quick resource, and then I have Councilor Zechariah and Dunn in, relative to kind of what Councilor Hall Harper was speaking about and some of the kind of like data interests I was hearing from Councilor Gilbert. I know Impact Tulsa does have, I've seen it before from presentations of them, like these major indicator indices as well as heat maps. I think Crystal, just to tack on to the idea of like getting those quarterly reports, something that could be helpful, which I know is always a little frustrating because these are just like made up lines for election purposes based on population, but it could be helpful to work with them to be able to present some of that information by district. That's usually something, a question that ends up happening here. I know that's definitely not understandably how those indicators or heat maps are broken out of data that they have, but I think almost every time someone shows us like a map or a set of data, people always do want to see, what does that look like in my district? So that would probably be helpful, but yeah, just so everyone knows, they do have a bunch of those, like you could go look now online and see a certain data, not like a PTA data set like you mentioned, but they have a lot of different, what does it look like, across the city, or I think it's probably mostly by census tract data sets that are really helpful. Okay, I had Councilor Dr. Wright.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, because things like eviction, my district was the highest for eviction, and so I do think that we need to see those things so that we align the housing strategy, maybe what Parks and Recreation's doing, like for after-school programming or out-of-school time. The thing that I appreciate is, for as long as I've been at the city, we kind of took this approach of like, we don't have any say on what happens in the schools.
Yep.
Therefore, we don't have any say on what happens with families.
Other than school guards.
Right, well, so we've done those infrastructure things, right? We did the school safety improvements, which we could do directly, and I think that was important, but I know that that's been a frustration when I'm on doors talking to constituents, or when they're coming to town hall saying, why aren't you doing more about the schools as a city? And because of the way our government's structured, like, government is saying, you can only do these things, but what I appreciate is from a strategic and policy approach, you're finding the places that we can make impacts, and that we are making decisions, whether it's an advocacy decision or a policy decision or an investment decision, and helping to draw down dollars, because these things are all interrelated. Where a grocery store goes, where a bus route is, our municipal court reform, looking at juvenile court and why people were like failing to appear is all tied to all of these things. So I'm excited for the work. I do think we are gonna get the questions about, what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and then what are the benchmarks? So I think quarterly reporting to start would be great. Impact Tulsa, Ashley Phillipson is there. She was in the mayor's office here, so I think that's a smart move too, because she understands like how we're set up. And she has those relationships in the buildings, and Dr. Kimbrell was on the planning commission, so it's a good fit. I'll just say again what I said before, because I think it's important. I know the focus is very much on TPS, as it should be. It's a large school system, but we also have in our districts, other school districts, public schools, private schools, kids that are homeschooled, kids that are in virtual school, and so when we're talking about schools specifically, I hope that from our side, we're looking at all of those impacts in ways that we can help. And then just Counselor Gilbert talking about PTA and things, maybe we as counselors, as we are looking at neighborhood conditions indexes, and we know that neighborhood schools are not necessarily functioning the way they did 30 years ago when they were put in neighborhoods, and maybe there's even some friction there. We're all dealing with the pickup and drop-off issues that happen now that anyone can go to any school. Maybe we can help facilitate homeowners associations and this PTA opportunity, because a lot of neighborhoods maybe don't have young families in them right now. Like, they're in a transition, but they should still be caring about what's going on in the neighborhood school, and so maybe that's where we create community and collaboration and help solve the crosswalk issue and those kinds of things, because we can identify who those doers are in the neighborhoods.
So one thing that could be helpful, I apologize, I'm going to have to leave in a second. One other good thing about Impact Tulsa, you think about some of that PTA type, community stuff. They do spend a lot of time, and I think everybody on their staff has gone through what's called results-based facilitation. So being able to facilitate groups, so like that could be another asset to counselors as you're trying to bring people together around a conversation around children and youth. They have a team that does that really, really well, that I imagine would be more than happy to come, just at the neighborhood level, if you want to have a conversation about education or how do you do it, I think they would be.
And just outcomes for supports for families. I mean, in my neighborhoods, it's like kids don't have a bus stop, but they have to stand in front of someone's house.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
No,
Mayor.
absolutely, thank you.
And I'm glad you brought up results-based facilitation, because every time I get those emails that are like RBF training, I always have to pause to check those. Okay. I'm just like, I know.
So Deputy Mayor Reyes is here too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Mr.
We still-
Miller.
Yeah, we still have, yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback on Counselor Gilbert, Counselor Harper, and Counselor Dr. Wright, and because my comments were going to be on the truancy and evictions and housing and the stability of our family structure and apartment complexes as well, and the inability of transportation. Transportation is also a big issue when you're subjected to eviction problems. It's just this domino effect of inability to provide all of the resources and sources needed for the educational purposes of your children. So I appreciate all the comments and the data request. Thank you.
If I may, I just feel like to highlight what you're saying is the use case for this work, right? We are not directly overseeing the schools, we don't directly oversee other sectors, but what we do, we support children and families in the 918, in the Tulsa area, in the Tulsa city. So I think everything you mentioned is what we're going to be bringing to the table with the office and also the cabinet, which I'm so excited. A couple other counselors reached out as well to want to be part of it or recommend people. So that is how we're going to have effective policies, programs, practice changes, events, services that don't exist now or maybe don't exist in the way that they need to have the impact that we want. So I just wanted to highlight that's the use case is being made right here, all the things that you're mentioning.
I have one last clarifying question that this is potentially for finance or maybe for broader administration. So going back to, I know the mayor was like, oh, you tossed in a piece of the charter in here, which like, I did. But I was curious, so is this, like, does this office exist right now? Does us sending this establish this office, or is this office not technically going to exist as like a formal office or like, bucket of a budget until the next fiscal year?
From a budget perspective, this is just in the mayor's
Okay.
office, their department.
Okay.
Administration.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That was my curiosity. Okay. Anything else on this item?
Thanks for the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone from the mayor's office for spending time with us.
Thank you.
It was super helpful, and we will not ask you to be here for probably more than 40 minutes at a time, I guess. Can't promise. All right, we are on agenda item 7. Ordinance amending the fiscal year 2024-25 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $50,000 recognized from unappropriated fund balance within the 2020 sales tax fund for Kendall Whittier Main Street improvements. Jared.
Good morning,
Finance.
Jared from Budget. This is just following up, council approved this priority project previously, so this is the budget action to put that $50,000 into appropriation so it can be used.
Yeah, this is from, just for everyone's knowledge, the, this is all of that like work that's with the matching grant for Kendall Whittier. Okay, anything on this item? Great. Agenda item 8, ordinance amending the fiscal year 24-25 budget to recognize and make supplemental appropriations of $10 million from revenue received from the sale of stormwater revenue bonds within the TPFA 2025 Stormwater Bond Subfund. Let's see, Hager Creek Storm Sewer Relief Stormwater Maintenance Building. Sounds fun.
Yes, this is, we just closed on the sale of stormwater revenue bonds. This is putting the appropriations in place. $3 million would go to Hager Creek and $7 million to the facility building. The stormwater maintenance staff has long since outgrown where they're currently staffing, and so this will finally get them out of trailers.
Okay, great. Any questions from, okay, that sounds like a good plan. All right, agenda item 9, ordinance amending the fiscal year 24-25 budget to make supplemental appropriations of $5,853,942 from unappropriated fund balance in the TMUA sewer operating fund and to transfer unencumbered and unexpended appropriation balances of $4,209,635.21 between projects within the TMUA sewer capital project subfund and to transfer unencumbered and unexpended appropriation balances of $964,075.63 between the projects of the 2024B sewer revenue bond subfund. Whatever I just read, yeah.
It sounded great. So there's a couple things happening, and I'll give the most abbreviated version, but the ultimate goal is to put $9.8 million in sewer rehab in the cash-funded capital fund, and another $964,000 in the same sewer rehabilitation project on the revenue bond side. And to get to there is a cash fund balance in the sewer operating fund of $5.8 million. So rather than including this sewer rehabilitation in future bond projects, we're going to cash fund it now. So we're transferring it out of the operating fund into the cash capital fund. And so that's where it's going, along with Coal Creek on the parallel interceptor has residual money that we're moving into that sewer rehab. And then in the sewer revenue bond, we are moving that $964,000 from sludge dewatering alternatives to the sewer rehabilitation project. It is, for the most part, scooping up residual funds and cash funding capital projects rather than putting it out for a loan later.
Okay. All right. Even though 10 says adjournment, that's not what's happening yet because we have an addendum. 11, resolution authorizing, thanks so much, Jared. Resolution authorizing payment of $3,045,219.81 to Rocket Properties LLC plaintiffs and Anthony P. Sutton, attorney at law, from the sinking fund as payment of a judgment awarded in case number CJ 2018-620, Rocket Properties LLC versus City of Tulsa et al. This has the emergency clause on it.
Good afternoon, councilors. Chad Becker from Treasury, here to provide assurance that there's a sufficient cash balance in the sinking fund to pay this judgment ahead of the levy placement on the property tax rolls. Judgment's been approved by the court and the mayor, and with council's approval, finance will issue payment to the claimant and forward all the necessary documents to the county to levy repayment to the sinking fund over a 3-year period. And we have Mr. Vaughn here from City Legal to discuss details of the case.
Hi, Lawson Vaughn, Legal Department. This is, I think you have already heard about the judgment, and you recently heard about a check that was issued for the $1.895 million was just the verdict amount. The rest of the amounts, the pre-judgment interest, post-judgment interest, costs, attorney fees were part of an appeal that went up. Court of Civil Appeals affirmed the judgment and gave some instructions on the interest and fees and costs. So it came back down, and so this number includes the pre-judgment interest, the costs, the attorney fees, and post-judgment interest.
Wow, and it's more than okay. Any questions?
I don't even want to start asking.
I know. Yeah, Councilor Holker.
So the attorney's fees and all that are different from,
And
I guess,
more.
the damage?
The damage
Damages that was
was,
settled on?
it was an inverse condemnation case, and so the amount of the property was determined to be $1.895 million. And so that payment has already been made because we knew what that amount was going to be. The other amounts were determined at a hearing we had just February 13th. And so we've got those amounts now, post-judgment interest, and this is up through, we think we'll have a check ready to be issued on March the 11th. So we've calculated post-judgment interest up through March 11th, and that's what that amount comes to.
So it's the 1.8 plus the 3 point, okay.
So it's
Correct.
expensive.
Wow.
Councilor Vogel.
Is this clear, all this? Is this the final?
There.
Oh,
When a lawyer smiles.
He's
that's
not
never
a
good.
happy smile, yeah.
No, there is another hearing set for April 15th on the appeal-related attorney fees, which our position and our argument will be that that should be included in the increase that was obtained from the appeal and in this calculation here. The other side is going to be arguing that they should have more in addition to this.
So we could be
So-
potentially looking at a third tranche.
There could be another.
Good grief.
I have Councilor Gilbert and then Councilor Archie.
So with this impact, how's the sinking fund?
Sinking fund's at 76 million as of this morning, so
Okay.
we're adequately positioned.
Oh, we didn't even guess first.
Right, I was gonna say,
I know,
we're
well,
gonna
we've
give-
been here long enough, we got less.
76.
Oh, really?
My brain.
In his
Yeah,
mind,
it's
after
great.
he heard the number.
See, we've been here long enough, we're not as fun at this point at the meeting. Okay, Councilor Archie.
My question is, how does this experience inform our future legal strategy or our inverse condemnation strategy moving forward?
Yes, we have absolutely looked at that, and this was just a lot of things that did not go the way that we wanted them to or expected them to but it mainly was an issue of exhausting administrative remedies. That was our main defense, that the judge did not allow us to really raise that defense at trial. And so that was part of on the appeal, that was the appeal issue. And the Court of Civil Appeals ended up affirming the judge on that, determined that it would have been futile. And so there are absolutely some changes that we are making to make sure this doesn't happen again.
All right, that's good.
Councilor Dr. Ray?
I appreciate that question because now we have a precedent.
Yes.
Right? So, a legal precedent that can be argued by the next plaintiff. I don't know how we mitigate risk or like how, like what the checks are before we take the steps that then lead to this kind of outcome, but who's taking charge of that? Is it the legal department or is it the department who?
Right, the case at issue involves stormwater regulations and stormwater activities that affected this property, approximately 5 acres at the intersection of Yale and the Creek Turnpike.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that goes into, our stormwater regulations and infrastructure. And we've had those conversations and those discussions, and part of the improvements, I guess you could say, that have been made are improvements to our administrative process that kind of led to this really unique set of circumstances in this particular property. Obviously, going back to 2015, this is not the way we would have gone about acquiring this acreage down there, but that's going to be the result. So it'll serve a stormwater purpose, and we've had those conversations with Public Works about those processes.
Okay.
And development services.
Okay, I just asked the question because as we are looking to put more rooftops and concrete and like I have, just even the widening that's needed and on East 91st Street, it is changing how we just had our first storm since that construction started. We saw water moving in different directions in the neighborhoods nearby. And so as we are looking to build and grow, these kinds of things are gonna come up. So I just wanna make sure that this serves as like a new way of if-then kind of decision-making so that we don't get on the back end of something now that does have precedent and does have probably some people who would even speculatively be like, let me go buy up easements near where we think developments would be because I could maybe get a payout in the future. Like, I don't know, if that's how people think, but I just want to be very careful. This is a lot of money to a lot of different parties and not just the harmed party, but the people that represented them, which, lawyers should make money, but this is extraordinary.
And we're going to take steps to mitigate that.
Sure.
Deed restrictions and then find some reuse of the property that is compatible with the stormwater environment.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you all so much with that. We are adjourned.